to another episode of the Post Podcast Review, or as we like to call it, the PP Review. So this is a format that we'll use to talk about stuff that we might not necessarily get to discuss as much on the podcast, but we'd like to look into deeper. The way this is going to work is the format is we'll start with a surface level description and review of what the subject that we're going to talk about is. Then we're going to have a rating, and then we're going to into a deeper analysis where there are going to be spoilers about the media that we'll be talking about. So for today's PP review, I will be talking about The Stranger, or as some like to call it, The Outsider, by Albert Camus. So this is a book. It's considered to be one of the great philosophical books in the history of mankind. So it was written by Albert Camus, obviously. And though he hated to be called it, he was truly a philosopher. He was from Algeria. He was French because Algeria was a French colony and still is a very French country in Africa. And he was a playboy. I'll get into that a bit later, but yeah, keep that in mind. He was a true playboy. He was also the branch of philosophy that he gets grouped into is existentialism, which is the discussion of, is it worth like it's somewhat like nihilism, where life is worthless. Is it worth living? Like seeing the ideas of life and whether it is worth living. So he died in a car crash, unfortunately, very young, with a train ticket in his pocket that he decided not to take last minute and to drive with his publisher. And so yeah, he wrote this book. It's considered one of his I also forgot, he died. He was enjoying life, and he truly did enjoy life. He loved football, or as our Americans viewers would call it, soccer, very much. So to get into The Stranger, or The Outsider, this is a great book that can be very easily summarized by its very first line, which goes, "Mother died today, or maybe yesterday. I can't be sure." So, though that's a very controversial line, it encapsulates the idea of this stranger very well. This stranger, or The Outsider, is about a person who cannot lie, about a person who doesn't attach any emotional value to anything he or anything or anyone around them does. This is important because in the book, this doesn't play out very well for him. Though you might think that, not lying is a good trait in a person, it doesn't really go well for him. This book is seen as a great piece of existentialism because through this person who doesn't feel emotion, it discusses the meaning of life somewhat. And though it might be meaningless, how one can truly enjoy it, So, yeah, but I'll get into that later with the more specific parts about how this book talks about enjoying life. Unfortunately, I can't really talk about the book more without spoiling it too much. So I will move on to the review, and hopefully I can elaborate more in the judgment section of this PP review. So I give this book exactly 4.35. This is because though it is an amazing book, don't get me wrong, it can't be a full 5. and that is because of the way it's written and the subject matter. So it's about a man who doesn't feel emotion. Therefore, the book is written without any emotion. And I think that can start to explain the lower, not 5 score now, because when reading a book, often the very enticing parts are the parts full of emotions. And in some parts, you really seek that comfort of emotion in this book, but it's not there to welcome you into its embracing arms. Though, that might not be a bad thing. It captures what it wants to talk about incredibly well. But, when you talk about a person without emotions, you're inherently going to have an emotionless and a very simple book. It's a very brief read with only around 70 pages, or somewhere between 70 and 100 depending on what version you read. But yeah, it's a very brief and very concise book. It doesn't waste time too much. So now that I got to review this book on a bell curve, I will get into the judgment part, which, warning, there will be spoilers ahead. So, this book begins with the death of the main character's mother. This is an interesting fact because he doesn't really care. And when going to the funeral, he doesn't, act like he is touched in any deeper way. He just goes and hangs out with the friends of his mom. And, the day before he got into a sexual relationship with a partner. And so it just shows not the disregard, but like the carelessness of the character. He doesn't really attach emotions to someone even as important to him as his mother. And yeah, so the premise of the entire book starts happening about midway through when him and his partner go out with their friends to the beach. And there at the beach, an Arab man threatens his friend. So after a little fight, the stranger comes back to the beach and shoots the Arab man. Now, why this is important? That's for many reasons, but he doesn't shoot him once. He shoots him first. He's dead, and now he shoots him more times. Just because he wanted to see how it feels to shoot a man, more specifically, And this is interesting because, of course, like a normal person, he's trialed for murder because he killed someone, And instead of, claiming it to be self-defense and lying, he is honest. He said, I wanted to see how it feels, And the jury doesn't take that well, of course. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. Doing something because you want to do it, not because it has any meaning to you or because you attach any significant emotional meaning to it. This is also interesting because being a non-Arab man in Algeria, he had very high chances of winning the actual case. But instead of, attaching emotions to his actions, he was trialed more for being an emotionless person. The trial ended over the impact of his carelessness about his mother's death and his relationships and romantic, sexual, and friendships had more of an impact than how the actual murder went down. And it's very weird to see because at some points you kind of want him to win the trial. Like, he's a murderer, of course, but they're putting him in prison for the wrong reason. And because of that, you kind of want the stranger to win the trial. Another interesting scene that I really think portrays the book maybe even better than the first line is this balcony scene where the main character is looking out over the street, and there's life happening, and he's eating chocolate and he's enjoying it. And this is probably the most emotion you'll get from the book, but it shows how, though he doesn't care about anything and though life is meaningless, he still finds the time to enjoy it. And the sun is going down, the people are going on the streets, the street lamps start to flicker and turn on, and you feel the atmosphere that the stranger is feeling. And as he's eating chocolates, he understands, though it's not necessarily or strictly written in the book, he understands that though life might be meaningless, that's why you should enjoy it. That's why you can go and eat that little extra piece of chocolate, because in the long run it will not matter. Or that's why you can do very well on that test, because you know not doing well will not matter either. So why not do good? Or why not do good? So that's a great way, I think, to see existentialism is nothing matters, so what? Let's enjoy it. This book really can make you challenge your beliefs, like what truly matters from your beliefs. If you believe in religion, then does it matter that you believe in religion? If you believe in certain politics, does it really matter? Should we just enjoy what we have? It brings up that discussion about many things, not necessarily just, religion. To each their own. Like Albert Camus would say, you should enjoy the life you were given. It's a privilege to have it. And, because it doesn't matter, you can enjoy it twice as much. There's so much more that I could say about Albert Camus and The Stranger and his philosophy. He truly is one of the greatest writers of philosophy in the modern sense. But I don't think I have the capacity for that, nor the time. So I think I will leave that to a different episode. But for now, thank you for tuning into the PP review, or the post podcast review. I'm Dominik Zeman, and thank you for watching.